Hello and welcome back to the stained glass tutorials. This is part 2, and I'll be picking up where part 1 left off. Remember, there are timestamps in the description so you can jump to where you need. Step 9. Grinding glass. Safety glasses are still mandatory. Gloves, and a hat or bandana, and a long sleeve shirt depends on you. I use water resistant gloves because I am constantly washing my hands and drying them out. It's a personal preference though. One important thing to note is that the fingers will not last long. It didn't take long for me to grind through them. I'll keep using them, I'll just have to find some way to patch them up. I don't use the disposable gloves because I use those for washing and patina. Unless you get a perfect break, the glass will have jagged edges and not line up with the traced or paper pattern. Even if you get a perfect break, use the grinder to round off the sharp edges. A grinder is necessary to make the pieces fit perfectly. There are many different types of grinders available. There are a couple fancy grinders, but I think for a beginner, a basic one is best. I use the Power Max 2 grinder. It has a 1/8 horsepower motor, 9.5 by 9.5 inch workspace, and a 1/4 inch and 1 inch grinding bits / heads, and 2 sponge holders. It has a spout on the side to make cleaning easier and is lightweight and relatively quiet. The work surface can be a pain to get off, but I just used a flathead screwdriver to insert into the, I think it is an overflow gap, and push until the work surface pops up and run the screwdriver around until it comes completely off. I fill the grinder 3/4 of the way with water. The water acts as a lubricant for the diamond grinding bits and suppressing the glass dust. Do not use the grinder without water. I put the work surface back on and put a sponge in the sponge holder. You can use any sponge as long as it makes contact with the water and the grinding bit. Grinding bits come in different sizes: 1/8, 1/4, 3/4, and 1 inch. There are some special bits, but I won't be going over those since I don't use them. The bits come in different grits: coarse, medium, fine, ultrafine, and standard. Think of grits in terms of sandpaper. Coarse takes a lot of material off and leaves noticeable marks. Medium takes less material off and leaves less noticeable marks. Fine takes even less material off and leaves even less noticeable marks. I use the standard bits. For me personally, I don't see the need for using anything other than standard grit. It depends on what exactly you want to do though. I don't have experience with other grits other than standard. Not every grinding bit fits every grinder. There is usually a chart that details which grinding bits fit which grinder. I learned this the hard way when I bought some grinding bits that didn't fit my grinder. To fix this, I used a Dremel to widen the inside of the bit until it fit on my grinder. Probably not the best thing to do, but grinding bits are expensive, and it was a 2-pack, and it works. The grinder rotates counterclockwise, meaning from right to left. I'm not sure if other grinders rotate the same way. If the glass is moved from right to left, more glass is ground off. If moving from left to right, less glass is ground off. Apply a moderate amount of pressure against the grinding head. If too much pressure is applied, the shaft of the grinder will become damaged over time. Not to mention, you are making the motor work harder than it should, which will shorten the life of the grinder. You can use either your fingers, or a grinder cookie, or something else to help guide the glass as you grind. A grinder cookie is just a circular object to help guide the glass. I use a grinder cookie and the top of a coffee container. The grinder will throw small bits of glass everywhere. That is just how it works. I recommend wearing a long sleeve shirt to make the cleaning process easier. I use a grinder shield to prevent glass from flying behind the grinder and to contain the mess. In truth, you could probably use 2 school folders to make a barrier if you wanted to, or 2 binders. I wanted it to look decent since I put these videos on YouTube. As I mentioned, the safety glasses are mandatory. I also wear a bandana and a dust mask because glass bits end up on my face and in my hair. A face shield would work too, but I'm guessing most people don't have one lying around. Grind the glass up to the paper pattern or trace line. As I mentioned in step 4, if you use a Sharpie, it will come off while grinding. The special pen for glass won't, but I don't trace patterns onto glass. The paper will get wet as you grind. This is normal. If the paper starts to slide off, then switch to a different piece of glass and allow the water-soaked one to dry. I also put the water-soaked pieces in front of a fan or air dry them. The really small pieces tend to get wet the instant they touch the grinder. Again, that is just how it is. Grinding small pieces is a pain, and I try and avoid it whenever possible. But if you've watched my videos, you'll know I still end up making tiny pieces. Check the fit of the pieces as you grind. Try not to overgrind. Sometimes it happens, and I'll show you how to fix it in a later step. Once all the pieces are ground and fit, the next step is washing off the paper, glue, and glass residue. Step 10. Washing the ground out pieces. Now that everything hopefully fits, the paper, glue, and glass residue need to be cleaned off. There are multiple ways to clean the glass: dish soap, rubbing alcohol, etc. I use dish soap, specifically Dawn dish soap. I made the mistake of using regular hand soap and had problems during soldering, though that may have been something else I did wrong. More on that later. I use clean water and put the pieces in a container and use a sponge and a little Dawn dish soap. The paper comes off and can be thrown away. I wash both the sides and edges of each piece and let them air dry, or stick them in front of a fan. Once dry, I relabel them using a Sharpie. I usually use black Sharpie for the lighter glass and silver for the darker glass. Something to note when using the silver Sharpie: it will not come off using soap and water. Nail polish remover or rubbing alcohol will get the silver Sharpie off. It may have to do with the chemicals in the black Sharpie versus the silver Sharpie, but I don't know. Step 11. Foiling. Once the pieces are washed, dried, and labeled, the next step is foiling. The foil allows the glass to stick together using solder. Depending on the thickness of the glass, there are different widths of foil: 5/32, 3/16, 7/32, quarter, and ½ inch. There are different manufacturers that make copper foil, but they all do the same thing: stick to the glass. Foil sheets are also available, where you can cut the width you want, but I've never used those. The top of the foil is always copper, but the adhesive side that sticks to the glass comes in 3 colors: black, silver, and copper. Choosing the foil backing is dependent on the color of the solder. Solder is naturally silver and can be changed to copper or black using chemicals. If the glass is opaque, meaning little to no light passes through, I use the copper-backed foil. If the glass is translucent, meaning some light passes through, or transparent, meaning all light passes through, I use the black or silver-backed foil, but it really depends on what color you want the solder to be. The width of the solder lines is determined by the width of the foil. I use 7/32 and 1/4 inch foil. Copper-backed foil is the cheapest of the 3. All of the pieces I have made so far that are on YouTube, shameless plug, use black-backed foil because I turn the solder black. I personally like the black more than the silver and copper. If the glass isn't dry by the time you foil, the foil will not stick. I take the glass and line up the width of the glass in the middle of the foil as much as possible, so both sides have the same amount of foil. I start the foil on an inside edge, meaning when the project is put together, the start and end of the foil meets the inside edge of another piece. This provides a stronger fit, and the foil is less likely to come off. There are foiling tools that help align the glass and foil, but I don't have any. I've used the hand foiler before in class, but not all hand foilers fit on the different glass widths. Those foilers are made with one type of glass width in mind. There is a table foiler that can accommodate several different widths of glass and would make foiling easier, but I would still need to foil odd shapes and small pieces by hand. Eyeballing it usually works for me. If I notice one side has more foil than the other, I take out the foil and try again. I can remove the foil and try again with the same piece of foil, but eventually the adhesive won't stick and I'll have to get a new piece. I use regular scissors to cut the foil and use a tool called a fid/burnishing tool to press the foil onto the edges of the glass. A popsicle stick would work just as well, or anything else as long as the foil is pressed onto the glass. At the corners of the glass, you will need to make slits to be able to fold the foil over. I use an X-Acto knife and cut on both sides where the foil needs to be folded over. I use my fingernails to fold the foil over. You can use your fingers as well, but I sometimes get foil cuts. It's like a paper cut, but with foil. Use the fid/burnishing tool/whatever you use to press the foil onto the glass for a secure fit. If you have a curved piece, it will require additional foiling. I know I didn't show how to cut curves, but you can grind them in. It'll just take longer. See step 12 for foiling curves. Otherwise, see step 13 for pinning the project and filling gaps. Step 12. Foiling curved and odd-shaped pieces. Depending on the degree of the curve, or shape of the piece, chances are that if you foil normally and you go to press the foil onto the glass, the foil will split, and a small piece of glass will be exposed. If that is the look you are going for, then it's fine. But if you don't want that to happen, you will need to use a technique called saddling. What this involves is taking a piece of foil and putting it on areas that might/will split. It must be done on both sides, using the X-Acto knife to cut where you need to be able to fold the foil over. When you foil normally, and the foil does split, there is foil underneath, and you can cut back the saddled foil to match where the regular foil is. If you try and saddle the foil over already split foil, it may come off while soldering. I've done it both ways, and saddling the foil before foiling normally is the correct way to do this. If the foil overheats and the saddled foil is on top of the regular foil, the saddled foil will, more than likely, come apart from the regular foil. Step 13. Pinning the project and filling gaps. Now that everything is foiled, you can pin the pieces to a non-instantly flammable board. Home assault, drywall, ceiling tiles, and thick plywood work. Don't use thin plywood or any thin material, as that can warp if heat is applied. I use a piece of drywall that I've had for years. Push pins or thumbtacks will do. I lay the paper pattern onto the board and align the glass to fit the pattern as much as possible. I pin each piece of glass onto the board and can make slight adjustments if needed. The paper is used to make sure all the pieces line up according to the pattern. If you don't care about that, then you don't need to use the paper. If you notice a gap when all the pieces are pinned, there is a way to fix it. If the gap is too large, you'll probably have to recut and grind the glass. If the gap is small enough, you can fill the gap using copper wire. I use the same wire that I use to make hooks. I cut the wire slightly smaller than the gap so the wire fits into the gap. I don't put the entire length of the wire in and then try and cut it. I made that mistake, and it was a pain to cut the wire to be flush with the glass. I ended up having to use the Dremel to grind the copper wire. Now, you can begin soldering. This concludes part 2 of the stained glass tutorial. I will have part 3 out sometime soon. Remember, I've left links in the description if you want to know more about stained glass. Like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them. If I am unable to answer them, check the stained glass subreddit page. My username is Polymorphic Spectre. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next tutorial.